for Congress to regain its national image, it would simply have to make the point to the opposition parties that, we will give way to you in areas where you're stronger, clearly stronger than us, and you must give way to us where we're stronger. And inevitably, the Congress will fight far more seats than any of the opposition parties by far. And at the end of the day, whether Mr. Modi has 1 degree or two or none has absolutely no impact on the daily lives of anybody in our country. What policies Mr. Modi undertakes, what he does to our democracy, how he conducts his policy. I mean, those are the kinds of things that actually can be held against him. Well, I think that frankly, there are a couple of unintended consequences that the BJP has found itself dealing with, which frankly, they may not have entirely expected. One, it seems to me, is undoubtedly the fact that there's been a tremendous reaction from the opposition, where even a number of parties, particularly regional parties, where they have traditionally seen Congress as their rival in their states, and parties which have not recently shared a platform with the Congress, have unanimously come forward and supported the Congress and Rahul Gandhi in this particular episode. In fact, one of them, the Chief Minister of Kerala, Pinarayi Vijayan, was a genuine surprise. And then his party leader said, well, we're not supporting Congress, we're defending democracy, which is fine, because that is exactly the way that I think many in the Congress would like the opposition parties to see this issue, that it's beyond Rahul Gandhi, beyond the Congress party. It's about defending our democracy, defending opposition parties' right to have a level playing field, and preventing the misuse of autonomous institutions, including the judiciary in this case, to settle political scores. So I think that's one major piece of good news, or as I said, the law of unintended consequences operating for the BJP. The second is that in many ways, what we're seeing in terms of public sympathy, and I may be a bit biased because I've been in Kerala from the very next day of this development, but what I'm seeing here and generally is that the public has become very, very sympathetic to Rahul Gandhi. And certainly when I ask people who are not known to be Congress supporters, tell me, put Rahul Gandhi aside for a minute, put Congress aside for a minute, is it good for democracy in our country if the principal leader of a major opposition party is locked up for 2 years and not allowed to appear in parliament for 8 and not have his voice heard? And unanimously, even people who tell me that they voted for the BJP last time, they are saying that this is not good. So I would say that the BJP may have actually gone a bit too far in terms of their overreach of getting the what's the word I want? Getting this leader essentially disqualified in this manner. So that remains to be seen, but I think we need to make it very clear that in this particular instance, the government has done something which honestly is reprehensible, and that therefore, instead of the BJP gloating about this, they should have taken a very different approach. I said on television a few days ago that if I were advising the BJP, I would have said, actually, they should appeal to the court to give him a less severe sentence in order to show that they're not trying to silence him. Now, instead, we are seeing the BJP MPs and ministers gloating about Rahul Gandhi's discomfiture. But when people point out that it's almost impossible to find an example of a criminal defamation case actually creating a situation where the person found guilty got the maximum sentence. It's extremely rare. I've had people digging up, Googling, searching law records. It's very difficult to find any example of a 2-year sentence. And the point is, you're giving somebody the maximum punishment, that too for a statement that clearly lends itself to at least 2 possible interpretations. And you are doing so because that maximum sentence happens to be the minimum sentence required to disqualify him from parliament. I mean, that obviously doesn't, that smells to high heaven. It's just not a good way to proceed. And so these things are really troubling. And for me, you're quite right that the real issue is the vote, and the real issue is the vote in northern India, because in the south, we realize that the BJP really doesn't have traction anywhere except in Karnataka. And everything I'm hearing suggests that in Karnataka, they're about to meet their Waterloo. So in these circumstances, we are going to see a south that's largely turning into unfriendly territory for the BJP. But if you look at the North, we will have to make the campaigning effort to convert the genuine level of public sympathy and certainly intellectual sympathy for our predicament into votes. Remember that it helps when the other opposition parties are sympathetic, because one of the key tools for this would be if um, the result of the sympathy publicly expressed by opposition parties is a greater willingness to get on a common platform. Because we can't forget that the ruling party won the 2019 elections with just 37% of the vote and still won more than 60% of the seats. The rest of the vote went to 35 victorious parties, all represented in the current parliament. But if many, if not a majority of these 35 could now find a new reason to come together and stop dividing each other's vote, the BJP might genuinely find it much harder to win a majority in 2024. Now, I've read the cynical theory that the BJP doesn't really mind, that what we're seeing now is an elaborate game meant to build up Rahul Gandhi as the principal challenger, thereby turning 2024 into a Modi versus Rahul election that the BJP show they can win. I've heard that theory. I'm sure some of you are writing that theory. And if they're right, that's Chanakyan in the extreme. But I would say building up a major rival is also an extremely high risk strategy for a party that didn't win a majority last time, won 37%, and that's now currently comfortably ahead in the polls. That's why I'm saying it's an own goal. It's like you've got everything going for you and you do something that shoots yourself in the foot. So if the result of the exercise so far has been to put a halo on Rahul Gandhi and to unite a fractiously divided opposition, then surely this is an own goal. I stand by those remarks. If you listen to what he said, he chose his words very carefully. And he actually said, number one, this is an internal problem and it's one that we have to solve ourselves domestically. He made that very clear. Secondly, when he mentioned democracy, he didn't ever say, you countries should do something about our democracy. On the contrary, he said, it's our problem, we'll solve it, but you should be aware because Indian democracy is a global public good. I think that's a very valid proposition because our democracy is indeed something that sustains the credentials of democracies worldwide. And for the longest time, we were actually a sort of poster child for a shining democracy in a world in which the rise of China and the continued autocracy in Russia had given a real challenge, if you like, to the Western notion that the end of history had witnessed the triumph of liberal democracy, because liberal democracy wasn't actually ruling a couple of billion people. And therefore, India was often held up as the example that, look, in the developing world, you've got a country that is a shining example of democracy. And what Rahul Gandhi was saying was that if India ceases to be that, or if it starts slipping down the slippery slope of being, of converting into what, as the Swedish VDEM Institute called it, not a democracy, but an electoral autocracy, that would certainly not do India any good and wouldn't do the global case for democracy any good. So that was the argument. I think that's a subtle, fairly sophisticated argument. It wasn't, as it's being portrayed, a sort of crude attack on India in a foreign country. I don't think that he can be accused of having done that. Politics that actually attacks people for personal traits, qualities, qualifications, and so on, is very rarely welcome in any political environment. I mean, it's. I know, unfortunately, that everyone does it, and certainly many people in the BJP have done it. And I myself have been a victim of very many personal attacks, so I know how unpleasant it is and how unpleasant it feels. But I do think that. These are the kinds of things you can joke about in a WhatsApp group, or you can share messages and you may influence minds that way. but to make them a public issue, I think, is wrong, because ultimately what should matter in any political process, Vandita, is um, what affects the lives of voters. And at the end of the day, whether Mr. Modi has 1 degree or two or none, has absolutely no impact on the daily lives of anybody in our country. What policies Mr. Modi undertakes, what he does to our democracy, how he conducts his policy. I mean, those are the kinds of things that actually can be held against him. Um, I think that it's not necessary to go into his personal life, to go into his qualifications, to go into his relationships with anyone, whether it's his mother or brothers or family or anyone else, his wife, whatever. I mean, I just don't want to go there. And I think that most Indians would share the view. I mean, frankly, we all get WhatsApp forwards about all of these things. And they're probably, for every WhatsApp forward that's poking fun or being satirical or derisive about Mr. Modi, we probably get 10 in the other direction, attacking Rahul Gandhi and the Gandhis and other Congress leaders for real or imagined sins. And questioning Rahul Gandhi's paternity and parenthood and all sorts of nonsense. That is unfortunately what's happening on social media, but it doesn't mean it's a good thing. And I certainly would say that it should not be the stuff of public politics, in my personal view. Having said that, let me at least grant Mr. Kejriwal the point that I think his argument was not just about the qualifications, but whether an election candidate has misled the public by filing a false affidavit in the election. That is the issue that I think was being raised in that process. And you could argue that that is a legitimate issue to raise, given that the other side would not hesitate to raise such cases if they could disqualify a candidate in that process. So, I mean, there is that. But for me, by and large, I tend to stay away from the personal. I've won 3 elections so far, debating issues and refusing to get down in the muck with anybody. And I'll try and keep it that way. I think it's widely seen that of the 543 seats in Parliament, a little over 200 seats are seats which are a straight fight between Congress and BJP. And so there is no other party of which that is true. And therefore, by definition, the Congress is the principal opponent of the BJP, and it's the only pan-Indian opponent of the BJP. And when I say pan-Indian, it's even when we did badly in the elections, we got 52 seats in the last Lok Sabha. The 52 seats were scattered throughout the country, north, south, east, west, northeast. We had a presence everywhere, and we won elections everywhere. But in the old days, we might have won 20 seats in a state, and this time we might have won just 1 or 2 seats in the same state. But at least we have that footprint everywhere in the country. So I would say that for Congress to regain its national image, it would simply have to make the point to the opposition parties that, we will give way to you in areas where you're stronger, clearly stronger than us, and you must give way to us where we're stronger. And inevitably, the Congress will fight far more seats than any of the opposition parties by far. So I think the opposition parties will also recognize that. Even those who have stayed away from the Congress know at bottom that there are a couple of hundred seats where the best they can do is be spoilers. They just can't actually ever be credible challengers because they have no presence, no history, no workers, no cadres, no organizational capacity. So I think that there is a real basis for what you're suggesting. Sit down with the opposition, literally go through the 543 constituencies of the pencil, and see if you can come to a consensus easily on 90% and with more difficulty on the remaining 10% as to who is clearly the most obvious non-BJP challenger in a particular seat. And I think if you do that, we might well find opposition unity turning out to be a real prospect.